Hello and welcome to the Comedy Slab podcast. I'm Shane Swackhamer, and he's
who's he?
He's actually lazy. Do you know? I was hoping he wouldn't comment on that or notice it straight away, because I'm toying with the idea of changing my name, because the program that we're going to slab this week is directed by E.W. Swackhamer.
I'm so close personal relative.
Well, no, I just thought, what a cool name. I want a bit of that, really. That's all it is, you know. So, but yeah, I just thought Shane Swackhamer. But perhaps that's the name is what I've needed all along to.
That's where you've been going wrong.
Yeah, to launch.
Sadly, yes, he shuffled off this mortal coil 1994, so we've been without it for a long time.
Exactly. So, is it time that the world had another Swackhamer, or not? Do you think? I don't know.
I would have thought it's long overdue.
Well, okay, I'll give it a go then. So,
be my guest.
This is Shane Swackhamer, sometimes known as Shane O'Connor. He's Adrian Lacey, and together we are the
Swackhamer brothers. No,
I don't think it's. I think that's pushing it a bit. In it too, after losing one, is not on at all, is it really? But we are the inhabitants of the Comedy Slab. And between us, we like a bit of comedy, and we will have a chat about a bit of comedy. Every week we choose an alternate programme, or alternately we choose a programme every week, alternately.
Alternatively.
And then he'll choose one week and I'll choose the other.
Following week.
just to make sure it all works out all right. And we will, between now and the end of the podcast, tell you all about the programme that we've chosen for this week, and we'll play a couple of clips and we'll give it some marks out of 5 each, giving it a grand total out of 10. And that's it, really. There's nothing more complicated than that. Although, before we head on to the comedy news, which is what we always do, I've had a bit of a win this week.
I thought you were going to say whinge.
No. And can you see that? Because we've got Skype. I don't know whether you can say I'm holding a finger up to you.
I can now. I thought we were friends.
Not the first time that's happened, I tell you. You can't really see it now. It's held up quite nicely, but I cut my finger in the process. But I had a win. My Dyson broke this week.
Right.
And isn't the internet wonderful? I fixed it.
Were you Dyson with death?
Oh, that's good. That's good. I fixed it thanks to the internet.
No.
It's incredible.
You just gave it some Wi-Fi and it was better.
No. I blew up the motor on my Dyson. So I went online, bought a motor, bought a new clutch assembly, bought some new filters for it just to be on the safe side. And then I sat down and watched a video of a bloke showing me how to change a motor on the Dyson. And I did it. And instead of spending £270 on a new Dyson, I spent 40 quid on a new motor. And I've got a working Dyson. How cool is that?
Yeah. That's very cool.
Anyway, shall we, before we head off and have a look at what we're going to slab this week, which actually was a listener recommendation for this week, shall we head off into the comedy news territory? Because I pinged you over a story earlier. I don't know what whether you made anything of it or whether you heart sank or sang. I'm not really quite sure.
Can I say this, or are you going to say what we're talking about?
No,
I don't want to steal your thunder.
We're all friends here.
It's a radio revival, and indeed an audio revival, of The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, with David Haig in the role, which was made famous by Leonard Rossiter. And it's a direct version, isn't it, from the novels rather than a retread of the TV scripts, which I think is wise.
Yeah, well, is it? I don't know. I mean, this is the thing that there was a line in there that made me think, oh, is that what it's all about? They said they're going to cut down on the mother-in-law jokes. I mean, there was this running gag, wasn't there, whenever they mentioned his mother-in-law, that they cut to a clip of a hippopotamus running across the
Well, you can't
wilderness.
Do that, can you, on radio? You could have hippopotamus-type music or sound effects or both.
Or noises or...
Yeah. But I know that would get your hackles up, but the world has actually changed since 1976, when it was ever first broadcast.
Oh, I don't think it has, really. I mean, people like to think it has. In fact, there was an interesting study yesterday. I thought of you immediately, and they were saying, the easiest people to brainwash are the people who believe that everything's lovely. I don't think anyone could accuse me of being in that category. Oh, I don't know. But anyway, I digress, sorry. But yeah, it minimises the mother-in-law jokes. I thought, why would you even have to say that? That was a very small part of what it was all about. The interesting thing is, I've interviewed David Haig, And if people don't, who's David Haig? He was Inspector Grim in The Thin Blue Line, wasn't he? Oh, I don't want any of this namby-pamby, wishy-washy, all this sort of stuff.
I think the winning line there, if I may quote, you might need to bleep it, was he was saying to the troops or the fellow officers, "It's my arse on the line, so pull your finger out." We have. Do we not have Ben Elton to credit for those lines?
He's always good for a knob or a bottom gag, isn't he? So
he'd love David Nobbs, who's the writer of Reggie Perrin.
By his own admission, he's there with the knob. But yeah, I mean, and so, but I interviewed him once on the radio. God, he's a really serious actor. He really is.
Oh, I remember you saying that because you were going to sort of josh with him. You felt, but
yeah, I thought he might have a. I might not be. This might not be true, but I said somewhere in my mind that whenever I interviewed people, I'd say, "Well, can you do me an ident?" I got Doreen Mantle, who played Mrs. Warboys in One Foot in the Grave. I've got a lovely clip of her saying, "Oh, Mr. Meldrew, can you please come quickly? Shane O'Connor's on the radio. He's very good." And I used to get people to do kind of idents for me like that, and I'm sure I asked him, and he said no.
He told you where to stick your ident.
Yeah, which is fair enough. That's his
fair enough. I mean, you weren't offering any payment, if I know you, type one.
Not at all. But no, I just thought the reason it caught my attention, and I've interviewed David Nobbs as well, I think I mentioned before, but the reason it caught my attention is exactly what you mentioned there, is that they've decided to go for the novel rather than basing it on the series. And I just wonder, when they do the remake, because they did do a TV remake of Reggie Perrin, didn't they? Or it wasn't so much a remake; it was a reboot in a way. They kind of
using the original scripts.
No, had nothing to do with the original scripts at all. Although it did have David Nobbs on board. It was one of the last things I think he was involved in before we lost him.
Right.
So they'd done a TV version, and I thought, so you want another one? And this time you're going to go for radio, and this time it's going to be off the back of the books. I don't know.
Look, it's as good as the version becomes, and that's why I can't really predict. I suppose, generally, the more comedy made, the better. It doesn't mean every comedy is going to be brilliant, and there's no guarantee, because the last Reggie Perrin was quite for people of a certain generation, or if people go back and look at it. I think it had a certain something to it, and it's culturally significant. No reason to think this can't be, but I guess it can't. Well, for one thing, it's on radio, which sadly for many years, ever since Grace Archer burnt in the Archer's fire, and on the night of ITV launching, radio's been in the shadows, hasn't it, compared to TV? So it's never going to have that impact. And for people of a certain generation, they're going to compare it. That would be us, you and me, and one or two others. Compare it to the original. But, there's always a place for that kind of midlife crisis. I mean,
What's your recollection of the original? Because, we're around the same age, aren't we? And I remember saying to David Hobbs when I was talking to him, and I said, no disrespect to his work, but I think I was kind of just at the wrong age to fully appreciate what it was all about. And I said, and I got more from it and more out of it when I went back to it as an adult than watching it as a kid. I think a lot of it might have gone over my head to I was a very naive and innocent child. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was naive, but by virtue of not seeing it originally, I had my head buried in textbooks, which is a bit dull.
Right.
I've made up for lost time, though, and I'm truly practiced at being ignorant now, but I watch a little bit more telly, not a vast amount more. But when I was an announcer, I had to announce Reggie Perrin, and I remember ending on the words "Sorry, CJ." I found some sort of line along those lines, as it were. And I remember someone looking at the paperwork, because we used to have paperwork in those days, and these chitties would follow the tape box around when it was tapes in the box, and it had been out 7 times already by 1991, I seem to remember, which is going some for repeats, but that's also a measure of how popular it was, so it's not a negative thing. But you can't fully understand a character with a midlife crisis till you perfect your own midlife crisis, I think.
Yeah, true. I was just going to say how, given that when it went out, how would you be announcing it? Because you'd be about 14. When it went, I thought, God, those slave
years
drivers.
later, I should say. Yeah. My voice hadn't broken by then.
Yeah, and now on BBC One, it's my bedtime.
Mummy says I can stay up to watch Reggie.
Yeah, but then of course you were on a station. You were announced for a station that did repeats, or not repeats, but like old.
Well, it's called BBC One. I think they still do them, but.
Were you working for BBC One when you did it?
Oh yeah, at that stage, yeah. This is pre going to the dark side of commercial TV. But I thought it was nice because it made me sort of feel, all right, I'm introducing something that's sort of significant, because I remember people talking about it all the time. It was quite a miracle I managed to avoid it, because you couldn't avoid conversation about it. And it's quite funny if you think kids are picking up on it. So, that's how it managed to appeal across the age groups.
So as a final point then, what do you think about whether we should is it a cardinal sin, do you think, to actually I used to know him at the church I went to, is it a cardinal sin to remake? I remember I had this big row with Paul Merton when he was doing the Galton and Simpson things. I didn't mean to upset him. It was live on the radio again. It's really embarrassing, but I said to him, I didn't understand why he'd chosen to rework Galton and Simpson stuff. I think he did like the is it Empass? I think is the one where the two cars are and neither of them will move, and they wrote all these other comedy half hours, and he redid them. And they've been. I said I think he did a Hancock and stuff like that. I said I don't really understand why you did that, and he kind of really got bent out of shape with it all, and well, what have you done then? And all this kind of ridiculous argument. But all I meant was, there's this wealth of stuff that would come through. Why would you want to remake something that, it's like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm a great painter. I'm going to have a go at the Mona Lisa, see how that works out. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, except if you applied that to music, then you'd never have any cover versions. And sometimes they can be better. Sometimes they're not.
True. Yeah.
But jokes are slightly different. That if you've heard them before and you remember them in a certain way, then it can be odd if it's literally the same script again. But
and you've only got to sit there for like 3 or 4 minutes as well, haven't you? If it's turns out really badly, but if it's like half an hour, I suppose you can switch it off. But yeah, no, I do always wonder. We should, and maybe the Porridge reboot or the Reggie Perrin reboot. We should put one of those on the Slabs one of the week, shouldn't we? And see how they stand up, because we both know the originals. It'd be interesting to see how they stand out or not. Anyway, on to the topic of today's Comedy Slab podcast. If you're one of these people who goes, they're just like talking rubbish for about 12 minutes, then welcome. This is the bit that you normally join us at. It's a suggestion from a listener, and we really like your suggestions. Thank you very much. This came from Ian Klein, who said, fellas, have you ever tried Lookwell? Which it only got as far as a pilot. It was written by Conan O'Brien and Robert. You're saying Smigel, do you think? Or but yeah, written by the two of them. Conan O'Brien is the interesting one, and I guess we'll touch on that as we go through. Stars Adam West. Of course, people will know him from the 60s series of Batman, and maybe more recently, before his sad and untimely death, as Mayor West in Family Guy, as he provided the voice for that.
Oh, yeah.
But tell me, was this, because I'd never heard of this, were you in that same boat?
I was indeed, yes. We were side by side in the boat.
Rowing furiously.
With the water lapping at our heels.
Inside the boat.
Yeah, but I'm very grateful to Ian Klein. You've widened my horizons, and Shane. So, I looked forward to tucking into it, and I look forward to tucking into it this very evening.
Okay. Shall we tuck in and have a clip to tuck into first of all, so at least people can get an idea of what it's all about? I mean, it's a very simple premise, isn't it, really? And as much as Adam West plays this washed-up TV action hero who had a series in was it the 80s or 90s? They keep referencing it's the 90s, is it, I think?
Well, judging by the hair, isn't it the 80s? Although it's not precise about when this fictitious series began.
No, I presume that would have been fleshed out if they'd have got a series, which they didn't. Give us a second series, yes. Why?
Give us a first series.
Yeah, which they didn't get. So, anyways, he plays this washed-up action hero who's a cop. At one point, for some reason, he was deputized by a law enforcement officer, and now he believes that he's a sort of citizen vigilante, solving crimes and helping the police, although I think the police see it somewhat differently. And the whole thing starts off, there's a very what I would call an illustrative intro segment where they used to do in these 70s and 80s. If you think Dallas, they'd have pictures of the action, wouldn't they? And people turning around and speaking to people and all that kind of stuff. So they have that as the intro, sort of 70s cop show technique that they use. And the first scene, we cut to a casting agent's office as we eventually, not initially because it could be a bit confusing, but we eventually catch up with our hero, Ty Lookwell.
I'm here to audition for Happy Days, The Next Generation.
Right over there.
Yes, I learned a long time ago that a casting director only has so much time to make a choice. The thinking actor must use every edge to make that choice a foregone conclusion.
Wow, I guess I blew it, huh?
Perhaps, but you never fail when you learn from your mistakes.
You know, I recognize you. Aren't you Ty Lookwell?
Yes. But until this audition's over, I prefer to be addressed as Buzz McCool.
Well, it's nice to meet you. You know, I remember Banachek. That was a great show.
No, I wasn't Banachek. That was George Peppard. I was Bannigan.
Brannigan?
No, that was Hugh O'Brien. I was Bannigan.
Oh, right. You had the black secretary.
No, that was Mannix. I had a sheepdog.
Right.
Sorry, people. It looks like we have everyone we need. But thanks for coming down. We appreciate it.
That's just great.
They're lost, my friend.
Of course we could have gone a fourth season, but I felt that my character had said everything it had to say.
How did the network feel?
Similar. Well, best of luck to both of you.
Beautiful car, Mr. Lookwell.
Remember, the thinking actor.
The thinking actor who doesn't always think before he talks. You will be wanting a headline.
Yeah.
Albeit not with that terrible cod Irish accent. I've gone for look well now, but don't look again. And that needs a bit of explanation. It now looks, reading further down the entry in the Wikification page, that I've nicked this idea from Mr. Smigel, which is, it's a good sketch idea, but I didn't think the sketch could stretch. That might have been the headline, mightn't it? So they've almost been done a mercy, because whilst it can become a cult classic, no one can say, actually, that's a bit of a thin idea to stretch across an entire series. So I think they would have struggled. Is that your feeling?
I can't believe it. It's uncanny. It's like you've taken up residence inside my head.
Oh, please God, no.
And you're just sat there looking at this huge void, thinking, shouldn't there be something in here?
Hello.
This sofa.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Hello. Exactly what I mean, I'm just thinking, what would 6 episodes of this look like? And what would it have done to it?
Sorry, did you see the quote? So I might as well read it out, having trailed it.
No, go on.
He later, it doesn't say how much later, but post-production, expressed doubt that the project could sustain itself as a full-fledged television series, questioning if, and I quote, viewers would really want to view that every week. I'm not so sure they would have. And that was him in an interview, I think, or speaking to an author. And the other thing is, although we can say that it was aired in 1991, I think it had been gathering dust for quite some time, because it was put out on a night, this is on NBC, it was put out on the night when in the phrase they use here, they were burning off pilots which the network had passed on, so they had a backlog, in other words. I think it's mid to late 80s. If you look at some of the hairstyles, but unless they're sort of going against the chronology of it.
It's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because this was something that was done in the UK. This not to the same extent, but this idea that they were, they had like this shelf full of pilots that they'd then got to kind of use to get some value out of them. In the UK, I was just thinking about the Comedy Playhouse was a forum to try out pilots to see how that went. Ronnie Barker, of course, had a whole series, 7 of 1, which spawned Open All Hours, and Porridge came out of that series. So it's interesting, this concept, this idea of like kind of just getting, okay, let's film a pilot, let's see how it goes, let's chuck it out there and let people decide. I don't know whether that became too expensive nowadays, and people said, look, TV execs said we can't afford to do this.
I don't know. I get a bit weary of hearing the old line about we can't afford this, but at the same time, comedy is quite expensive per viewer compared to other forms. I think soaps, because of their greater audiences, although those are dwindling by earlier standards, soaps are probably better value, and they bump up the network share, which is a big stat that executives worry about. I don't know. You've got as much money as you ring fence for these things, haven't you? Really?
Yeah. I can never make up my mind whether it's a great idea or whether it shows a lack of judgment and vision on behalf of commissioning editors, and that they can't see something on the page and visualize it to say, yes, that will be a successful, let's make 6, let's make a series, or whether that's what they do now, whether they do that more often. And that's why you don't see so many pilots. We've had a few. I've noticed a few on the BBC, and the name escapes me now. In fact, there were a couple that one of them we slabbed, and I remember talking about the pilot was called something completely different. But they obviously tried the pilot. They obviously, market tested it and went ahead and made the rest of it. So I don't know whether this is making a comeback. Is it go, okay, we'll make 1 rather than we'll invest in a series of 6?
Well, I always remember hearing that Ricky Gervais insisted on making a taster for The Office because he didn't trust them not to give away the idea. In fact, weren't they talking about that in front of him, sort of floating it with a straight face,
right?
That we could get so and so in to do it, and he said, "No, I'm going to do it." I'm paraphrasing, but I think that was the sense of it, the gist of it. So you wouldn't have commissioned this on the basis of what you saw, even though you've enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it. It should be said, as far as it went, it was enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a no. I probably wouldn't have done, and for the same reasons, is that from what he was saying there, is that I don't all the way through. I'm thinking there were 2 things that really troubled me about it, and I don't know whether it's just its rarity that makes it a cult watch, but the 2 things that troubled me were the pace. And I don't know whether that's just it was of the time, and in the 90s the pace was very different, much slower.
Yeah,
and the gag count. I found myself thinking, this is almost like if we don't have a gag soon, this is going to turn into a drama.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, unusually, I would have said for its time there was no audience, was there?
No.
Or even in the American context, no canned laughter. Sometimes it's a live audience, but very often it's canned laughter, and we had neither. So in a sense, it was ahead of the curve in terms of fashion. But maybe that, there's different ways to interpret that. But I would have thought if the gag count is what it is, and I would have thought they were feeling liberated by not having an audience, but of course that's conjecture on my part.
Did you find yourself thinking, looking at your watch and thinking, is there another gag popping along at all anytime soon?
Yeah,
or?
I was going to make a cup of tea, but I didn't want to miss the next gag. But it turned out there would have been time to make several cups of tea. It's odd, isn't it? Because I didn't think of that in so many terms. I suppose I've got so used to this sort of dramedy type thing, as some people are calling it, which might be a bit too kind to it. I don't know, but if it's dramedy rather than comama, How else would it work? But I just wonder whether, if you put the comedy first, then the expectation is of a higher gag rate. It was a pleasant half hour. I don't think I felt cheated, but haven't we seen the? And this is no slight on Mr. Haig, who we were referring to earlier, but haven't we seen the serious actor a bit too often in TV?
Yeah.
The one who took himself too seriously and then becomes supposedly a joke, but the joke rings a bit hollow. I suppose it was a newer gag back then. I'm thinking of, did you ever see, and I'm not sure I did, Nigel Planer doing the serious actor, sort of sharing his technique. That was a TV series around that time, I would have thought.
Yeah, I can't think. What was it? No, I can't remember what it was called now.
Was it called I Actor, or am I confusing it with yet another series with, I don't know, a Rowan Atkinson or so? There's certainly more than one actor has tried to send up serious actors in that way.
It has been. I mean, the interesting thing is the casting of Adam West, I think, who unfortunately for him, and I don't know whether this is just in my mind or whether this is in the general population as well, but unfortunately for him, he cast a rather long shadow from his Batman days. I think when this was school holiday TV for me when I was a kid, that we used to watch reruns of the 1966 onwards series of Batman, which is all a bit high camp and a bit, wooden acting and done in exactly the same style as this. And I did find myself thinking back to Batman and thinking how similar Adam West was in that, and probably was. Adam West is one of these actors, and there are a lot of them. And again, I don't mean any disrespect to his memory, but he was one of those actors who played Adam West, and that's what you got, wasn't it? You know what I mean? There wasn't. He wouldn't come on and howdy partner, how you doing today? He didn't. He did Adam West, and that was the full extent of his range, really, in that sense. And so I don't. That kind of then sort of overshadowed what they were trying to do with this for me a bit.
But I went back to find out some pictures to see if I could recognise Adam, and of course I'd forgotten how covered up his face is in Batman.
Yes.
So you only see the lower half of his face. I mean, good-looking guy, and a bit of a waste of a good-looking face by covering up with a Batman mask. But I guess the role demanded it.
Although he did do some scenes as Bruce Wayne, didn't he, where he wasn't actually dressed as Batman.
Oh, did he? Right. See, it was never really on my radar, other than being aware of it. I do remember it as a massive hit. Of course, we had fewer channels then, but it seemed in my early childhood that you couldn't move for references to it. It was a significant show, even if it didn't deserve to be quite.
You see, I mean, I'm not saying I was easily influenced, but I spent 2 summers wearing my underpants outside my trousers as a result of watching Batman. So, pretending I was a superhero as well. So, I think I was quite easily influenced by TV.
Yes.
And popular culture more than you were, maybe. I think that's probably the problem.
Your mum was so relieved when you decided not to be a superhero.
Well, it saved a fortune on washing for a start. The underpants didn't take the kicking that they used to. I got to mention, and this is the interesting thing, I think going back to the pilots and, filming pilots and all the rest of it, Egbert's Wandering Swackheimer, as we should call him, or EW as he was known. No wonder they called him EW. He was king of did you see this? He was king of the pilots, this guy. He shot 27 pilots for television in his directing career.
Wow.
27. 18 went into regular production. Of those 27, that's not a bad hit rate, is it, for anybody, really?
Not at all, over half. And
we're talking programs like Law and Order, Quincy, SWAT. I remember SWAT vaguely, which used to be huge at the time. The Nancy Drew mysteries. I mean, this guy has been responsible for everything from Columbo to LA Law. Wow. So a huge career. So again, it was against the odds that this pilot didn't get picked up because this guy was king of he was directed by king of the pilots, really.
You'd be delighted when you saw he was directing, wouldn't you? Because you'd think, oh, right, well, we've got a fighting chance here, better than 50%.
Yes.
Sadly, it was not to be. But did you see what I suspect is the real reason it wasn't picked up? And it's nothing to do with quality or the chance of spinning it out to a series. Did you see what had happened?
No.
It was, I mean, I'm reading between the lines, but it was down as, quotes, a personal favourite of then NBC chairman Brandon Tartikoff. I think that's the surname I'm going to take if you're going to be a Swackhamer. Adrian Tartikoff, I think that'll do. Anyway, but then he left. It was a classic case of new broom sweeping clean, I think, and he was replaced by, as we all know, household names, Warren Littlefield. I mean, you know, my radio career was dashed by a change of management from the guy who brought me in to the guy who then thought, oh, no, I want to bring my new people in.
You know, the commissioning editor dies and you have to hold the pen to him to... I know it's on Partridge again, isn't it? Sorry. Yeah.
Worth a try.
Yeah, it was worth an effort. Yeah, I mean that's it. It is all down to, you know, one guy leaves and another person comes in and that's it. The baby goes out with the bathwater because they want to do their thing, don't they? And that's it really at the end of the day. But were there any? And this is just it was a thing that popped into my head and I kind of almost immediately dismissed it. Do you think there were any similarities between, and I'm not really sure where it fits in the timeline with each other, but any similarities or any standing on the toes of the likes of Police Squad, do you think, which we recently
I was going to
slabbed?
mention that. Yes, thank you for prompting me. Very definitely, yes. In fact, if you don't believe me, not that the people can see it, but I could hold up my notes to the camera. Although I now realise I didn't write that down, so I can't hold them up. I was convinced I'd written it down. Now you'll think you've given me the idea. But, I mean, it's pastiche of 80s. Well, you said Police Squad, you said harks back even to the 50s, doesn't it? But, I mean, they do create a hostage for fortune by having these very strong ticks to them, you know, the freeze frame or that was the Police Squad one, wasn't it? For the closing credits. So plenty to chew on, and the more seriously they took themselves, and the more they could be sent up and hopefully have humour at their expense for those who were doing that. But we tended to like Police Squad just quite a bit more than this, did we not?
I think it's in a different class. I mean, I think you know, this is if Police Squad is in the Premier League, I think then this is, you know, the old Division 4 or whatever. I think, you know,
Vauxhall Conference.
It's just it is completely a completely different animal, and I don't think it does half as much with half an hour as Police Squad. I think just the sheer amount that they ram in Police Squad, you know, everything is a setup, everything is a gag, isn't it? It's like setup, gag, setup, gag, setup, gag with Police Squad. Both visual and you know, spoken gags in that. And I got to the stage with this where I'm kind of looking and thinking, going back and scrubbing back and listening to the dialogue, thinking, am I missing something there? Is he saying something that I'm not getting? Is it time's gone by and the joke's past me, or is it you know, is it a cultural thing between America and the UK and I don't get it in that sense? I don't think it was. I think it was just a very slow pace, very spaced out in terms of the gags. I think, you know, the whole idea that, I mean, Conan O'Brien, I've never really warmed to. I don't know whether you've seen any of his stuff. I mean, I've always found him as an odd choice as a chat show host.
In what sense? Is he not particularly fluid with his own gags? No
fluidity, no warmth, no connection there between him and his guest. It's you know, he almost has guests on at the expense. I mean, Jonathan Ross in the UK, you know, whilst he does make jokes whilst he's going, I always get the feeling there's a warmth there there's an interest there between him and his guests, you know, when he interviews somebody, whether he does or not. And I've never really kind of felt that with Conan O'Brien. I've never really enjoyed watching his you know, his late night show and stuff like that whenever I've seen it. I've never really seen his stand up to a degree, so maybe that's where I'm missing a trick, perhaps. I don't know.
I'm going to try and do some research on that. You've made me intrigued. I mean, I generally don't get on with American chat shows an awful lot. It's people sort of, for me, that they're promoted above their pay grade as as superannuated comedians, and I'd say that with a heavy heart because I love, a good stand-up comedian can be fantastic. But the idea that I'd even want to be on Jay Leno's show when he was doing his thing, it's quite bizarre. I wouldn't know what to make of it to make it watchable, but that's not a problem I've had to face. Before we hear our second final audio clip, something's nagging away, which is, how is it that we can say we don't think this character will stretch to a series, and yet there's loads of things we could reduce to a formula. I was trying not to mention Mr. Partridge, but you've already done a sly reference, I think. You could describe Alan Partridge in a sentence, but the character is so much richer. Why doesn't that work with this guy? Because there's definitely comedic potential in an actor who takes himself too seriously. And then on top of that, he's been a TV detective or cop. And he takes that so seriously, he thinks he can actually solve things in real life. I mean, couldn't that work, in theory at least?
I suppose so. I mean, I think the problem with the writing with this is that they kind of wrote for the action rather than wrote for the characters. Mm. And I think the Adam West character, this Ty Lookwell fellow, we didn't really know much more about him, did we? We found out he got a housekeeper, I think. That was about it. Mm. Other than everything just reinforced he's a struggling actor and that he thinks he can solve crime. Everything was revolved around that. And I know it's only one episode, but if you think how much texture, for example, they put into something like Steptoe and Son, or even Alan Partridge, you think all the things that you learn about Alan Partridge in a roundabout kind of way, the things that he's done in his career, the things that he thinks are great, the things that he doesn't find embarrassing that you would. There's all of this kind of going into this, and the writing is not really about the mechanics of the scenes.
And that might be consistent, by the sound of things, with Conan O'Brien not particularly having empathy or a rapport with his guests. If he hasn't quite got that quality, I can't speak for Mr. Smigel, but there's potentially something there lacking, isn't there, to try and get humanity into a character.
I think that's the thing, and I don't know if it's the delivery of Adam West, because Adam West, as I say, delivers it as Adam West, doesn't he? There's not a lot of variation in that. You've got a lot to work with in that. So maybe the two colliding. Should we have another listen? You mentioned that we're well overdue another clip. Should we have another clip? In the second clip, we kind of figured by now as we go through the episode that his TV work has dried up. I mean, that first scene there in the casting director's office, it's quite obvious that he's not getting anywhere with that. But what he does do, and it seems to be quite successful, the amount of people that are in there, he holds a regular acting workshop where his young protégés not only get inspiration from him, the older actor. But it also seems, because he keeps happening, I think it happens about 3 times in the episode, he also seems to keep having this eureka moment, which is inspired by them.
Your head of gobbler is quite powerful, Miss Royster. And may I add, most enchanting.
Excuse me, Mr. Lookwell?
Yes, Ben?
Don't you think it would be faster if I demonstrated the transformation technique for the class?
Wait a minute. Faster.
Sir?
Fast. Race. There's an auto race in town, isn't there?
That's right, sir. The LA Grand Prix is here Sunday.
Car thieves. Outrunning the police. High speeds. Expert drivers attracted to Grand Prix.
Mr. Lookwell, are you all right?
Jason, how do you feel about portraying a pit crew mechanic?
What do you mean, Mr. Lookwell?
Let's just say that you and I are going to do a little Grand Prix auto racing.
No, you can't come in. You are not in the race.
I wonder if there could be more mileage in an actor who each week takes on different roles, but then maybe that's It's ignoring the flaw in the character, really, because he could be, I don't know, a doctor another week. But anyway, it's too late for me to try and make suggestions to revive this project. I should say, for legal purposes, it's a Brillstein Gray Productions, or BGP, and Broadway Videos. And weren't you telling me before we hit record, Broadway Videos is the brainchild or the company of
Lorne Michaels? Yeah, Lorne Michaels, the guy behind Saturday Night Live. Which has run for so long and then stopped and then run for so long again. He's the producer of this. He's the guy that made this happen. Anyway, shall we whack some numbers off?
Yeah, I wondered quite what you were going to say then. Right, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5, which, I don't know, is that generous? But anyway, I didn't want to be too mean, and I don't want to lose Ian as a listener, because I have an extra sensitivity when our dear listeners have made these suggestions. I know they're not asking us to like them, but we better have good reasons if we don't like them.
But the other thing is as well with this, and I think you this is the point you made early on, is that we really. The nice thing is that, I mean, I'd never even heard of that. You never even heard of it.
No.
And he's thrown it into the consciousness. So, the fact that he's suggested it and we've got to see it and we've had a look at it, I think whether we score it highly or not, hardly the point is really in that sense. But
yeah, but I'm oversensitive about these things.
And that's why I'm going to give it a 2.
Because you don't give a hoot. Okay, so we make that 5 out of 10. Well, that's half marks. But it doesn't sound like it would pass the test for us to give it a first series, never mind a second one.
No. Sorry for all you cult followers out there who like it, and may you continue to enjoy it as long as you want to. Anyway, homework for next week. What are you choosing?
I should say I did at least like the Firm Pops, which sounds dubious, but that's an ice lolly that makes your skin taut. So I thought that was a good visual gag for Adam West as Lookwell. Lookwell. Right, what have I got for you? Well, funny you should ask. That's a legitimate question, because we set the homework at the end of each show for the following week. I think I was recalling, my life is a blur between, did I actually say that out loud? Did I hit record before saying it? I think you and I were talking off air, was it last week, about a certain sketch in a certain sketch show where a guy runs over a turtle, the guy is Simon Pegg, on a London street, which is weird enough. This poor thing's flipped upside down. Weirdest still is when he gets out to check on how well the thing is, whether it survived the incident. It turns out he's speaking the wrong language because it speaks French.
It was a tortoise, not a turtle.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought it was a huge thing, but
tortoises do grow to be huge. The only reason I'm pedantic about it is because I used to own a tortoise years ago.
Right, when it was legal.
I think it was. We got it off somebody who was emigrating to Australia and said, do you want our tortoise? And my dad said, yeah, okay.
Right.
And but yeah, so no, tortoises are land creatures, whereas turtles are water-born.
Okay, that's clear now. Well, that's why we'd be in a London street then, obviously. That's completely sane. Right, do you know what I'm talking about, though, the series?
Yeah, join us next week for the reptile quiz. And,
no, it's Blue Peter and Frida.
Yeah, Frida, yeah. You showed your age there, fella.
Yeah, well, you got it.
Big Train, isn't it? Big Train.
Big Train, yes. And I haven't seen it since then, and then is a good 20 years ago, is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Plus.
It hurts to admit that, doesn't it, really? But yes, does. You're right. Absolutely true.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Was it 2 series? This is series 2, episode 1.
Okay.
And see what you make of it. See if time has been kind to it. Simon Pegg hasn't done so badly off the back of that and other things. His career's took off not too long after that, I think.
I think it's fair to say that. Well, we'll talk about this next week, but I think it'd be interesting to see. I think the cast, because I think the cast in series 1 was slightly different to series 2. I think it's fair to say they've all done really rather well for themselves. So, and I'm not suggesting that it's off the back of this. I think it's off the back of their own merits, because they were a fine cast, weren't they? But
absolutely, yeah.
I'm just hoping that it's got the writing a letter home sketch in it.
Which will, people who are not familiar with that won't have got too much from your wonderful rendition. But I don't know. I can't remember if that's series 1 or series 2 or... Anyway, fingers crossed. Series 2, episode 1, Big Train.
Nice one. Nice choice. Looking forward to that one. That's business and pleasure all wrapped up in one. Don't forget, if you want to go and have a look at our back catalogue or have a listen to our back catalogue, you can do so either on YouTube, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods. I mean, we're everywhere, aren't we? I mean, we are, not only are we ubiquitous, but we're everywhere. That's
and all over the place. Well, I certainly am.
Yes, certainly are. Yes.
Well, it just remains for you, Shane O. Swackheimer, and me, Adrian Tartikoff, stealing our names from Lookwell credits, to say farewell and do join us next week. I'm about to ride the big train home.
I've changed my mind. Can I be Tartikoff?
You already are, darling.